Good morning. Could we be facing more restrictions this festive season? The Prime Minister has resisted for now, but could he change his mind before New Year's Eve after saying they reserve the right to bring in further measures? What impact will that have on our plans for celebrations and holidays? The head of the World Health Organization calling for people to cancel events in order to save lives. We were keen to seek clarification from the government this morning, but there's no minister available to clear up the confusion for you. So we'll analyse the data and the latest lines with the World Health Organization instead. First, here's Laura Bondock.
Are COVID curbs coming? Wales isn't waiting. All sporting events behind closed doors from Boxing Day. No changes yet in England, but the uncertainty is crippling Christmas business.
We are down 20 to 25% on a normal week, when we should be 25% up on a normal week in the Christmas months.
Landlord Scott Illman is resigned to more restrictions, but it's a sobering thought.
If it's a short and sharp one, we should be OK. But it's the hardest month of the year, and we haven't made the money in December to pay our wages in January.
The empty tables say it all.
We've got plans to go and visit family, we've got friends coming to stay, and it's really difficult to plan any of that when we don't know what's going to happen.
I've told my parents we're not going to come back if, things escalate. My mum's ill, so we don't want to put that, that's a risk.
I think, missing a few New Years is worth it to kind of keep, COVID in check and things like that. But I'm also unsure that people, even if regulations were set, people would follow it, especially given the government isn't setting a good example at all.
COVID cases are soaring, but for now, ministers won't go further with measures.
We agreed that we should keep the data from now on under constant review, keep following it hour by hour. And unfortunately, I must say to people, we will have to reserve the possibility of taking further action to protect the public.
What that action means isn't clear, but already the Mayor of London's cancelled the Trafalgar Square New Year celebrations, and the Queen's called off her Christmas at Sandringham.
1 in 3 people who have COVID-19 have no symptoms and could be breathing it out without knowing.
Meanwhile, the push for care, caution and vaccines continues. Christmas is coming, but so too the feeling festivities will be short-lived. Laura Bundock, Sky News.
Well, in a difficult week for the Prime Minister, this was the scene at London's Alexandra Palace last night. What are they saying? Well, they're saying stand up if you hate Boris. Well, Darts Championships fans are not at all happy. Others scenes with signs, as you can see, showing images of cheese and wine, and this sign which reads, all round to Boris's after. Meanwhile, the head of the World Health Organization has called on people to cancel their holiday plans in order to save lives.
All of us are sick of this pandemic. All of us want to spend time with friends and family. All of us want to get back to normal. The fastest way to do this is for all of us, leaders and individuals, to make the difficult decisions that must be made to protect ourselves and others. In some cases, that will mean cancelling or delaying events, just as we have had to cancel the reception we plan to have with you today. But an event cancelled is better than a life cancelled. It's better to cancel now and celebrate later than to celebrate now and grieve later.
Margaret Harris from the World Health Organization with us now. Hello to you, Doctor. Good morning. Does the World Health Organization really want us to cancel Christmas?
Good morning, Kay. No, that's not what the Director General was saying. He was saying large events. So he was actually referring to a reception, a get-together we'd promised to have with journalists. We'd cancelled the one the year before, and we cancelled it this year because it's not something that we can do safely right now. And that's the point he was making. If you have gatherings that are not going to be safe, Change them, delay them, do them later, don't do them now.
What constitutes them not being safe?
Well, if you've got a large number of people or a considerable number of people, especially people coming from different places, you don't know what their exposure's been. People coming together in that sort of circumstance is what we call social mixing. That's the moment at which you're most likely to spread COVID and particularly Omicron.
Okay. I mean, okay, so let's see what that would mean for Christmas lunch then, should we? I mean, I often have 20 people around my Christmas table, emergency chairs out the shed and the like. Is that a bad idea this year?
So again, it's who you're bringing. What is their status? Have they all been vaccinated? Do you know, are you taking other measures? Are you opening your windows, ventilating your room? Can you space things? Have they worn masks? So there are lots of things that you need to do and take into account when you put your party together.
What about lots of little ones running around? Because, of course, they won't have been vaccinated.
Indeed. And again, one of the things you need to look at is not so much whether they've been vaccinated, but who's coming that is in the vulnerable group, like an older person or a person who's got underlying conditions, and have they been vaccinated? Because the vaccines are really protecting this group from getting into hospital and from sadly dying. So that's what Dr. Tedros was saying is please don't put people who are most likely to suffer from the severe form at risk.
But of course, you can still contract Omicron even if you've had your booster.
Indeed, Omicron is very good at spreading. So the problem is people are getting confused between the severe version and the actual just the virus getting into your body. Now, the vaccines are really designed to keep you out of hospital, protect from the severe version, protect the hospitals from filling up, and of course, protect us from all dying. But they're not so good at stopping it from getting into your nose and staying there for a little while, long enough for you to breathe on somebody else and pass it to them.
So lots of people can contract Omicron, is what you're saying, but not find themselves in hospital.
We're hoping that that's the case, especially in well-vaccinated populations. So that's why we're saying getting vaccinated is key, but taking all the other measures as well is crucial because that helps bring the transmission down and that reduces the risk. So it's the Swiss cheese effect. You do lots and lots of different things to really bring down the risks, really bring down the exposure. Then we're in a much better position.
So the World Health Organization is saying if you're double vaccinated, if you've got your booster, if you take appropriate precautions, there's no reason to lock down.
So we're saying we prefer not to see lockdowns, a big lockdown, because they have huge economic implications. They have very severe social implications and mental health implications. However, they do work. So governments do get to a point when the hospitals are overwhelmed where they run out of options.
Minimise travel is one suggestion. Step 2 that the Prime Minister might introduce as early as the 27th of December, fining people if they travel. What's the World Health Organization's view on travel?
So again, we ask people to take all precautions. And travelling is a moment where you're very likely to be mixing with a lot of different people from different places whose vaccination status you don't know. And you're likely to be in a position where you're in a crowded, poorly ventilated spot. So your risk does go up a lot. So again, this is something you need to think about. Why am I travelling? Do I really need to travel at this moment? Can I travel later and travel safely and have a really happy and healthy Christmas?
From what you're saying, it does sound as though the World Health Organization feels that the British government is probably in or about the right place at the moment and there's no need for any further restrictions.
So we don't give marks to any individual country. We understand that leadership and health authorities tailor their measures and their decisions according to the epidemiology in their populations, but also the cultural and behavioural dynamics at work in their populations. But the overall message is limit crowding and take the measures if you're out and about that will protect you, like wearing the mask and wearing the mask properly. Please wear it over your nose, everybody. The nose out of the mask, that's not working. That's not helping anyone. And make sure that you do the hand washing, the distancing, and really, really seriously get vaccinated. Not just get vaccinated, but if you know someone who's still struggling with the idea of being vaccinated, help them to get vaccinated.
When will we know whether Omicron is as big a worry as Delta was?
So we're already getting a very strong message that it's much more transmissible. And that in itself is a very serious threat, because even if most people do not have the severe disease, especially because we've got a well-vaccinated population, if you've got huge numbers of people infected, you will have a small percentage who get the severe form of, and that translates into big numbers, because, 1% of millions is a lot of people. So it's already very clear that it's a very serious threat.
And where's the World Health Organization on the mental health impact on younger people who say, you asked us to have 3 inoculations to keep the rest of the country well, we've done that. We cannot be locked down anymore.
Well, certainly that's why we're saying we prefer that governments do not get to the point, that your epidemiology does not get to the point where governments need to feel they need to make that decision, because indeed the mental health impacts are very serious, and we have seen a big rise in mental health suffering during this period. So if you do go into lockdown, look at how you can support people, what you can do to alleviate the suffering that it does cause.
Always informative. Thank you so much for joining us, Doctor. We much appreciate it. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. Merry Christmas. Now let's look at some of the tougher measures we could be looking at, given what we've just heard there from the World Health Organization. In step 2, there you go, it's very different to tier 2, okay? So you need to bear that in mind. There was easing of some lockdown restrictions, such as the opening of non-essential retail and personal care. If you take yourself back to the 12th of April last year, this is what was happening. But there was no socialising indoors, except with the same household or inside a support bubble. Meetings outdoors were allowed, including in gardens, for groups of 6 people or between 2 households. And people who lived in care homes in England were allowed 2 named regular indoor visitors. Our political correspondent, Tamara Cohen, is with us now. It is important to make the difference, isn't it, between tier 2 and step 2, Tamara, first of all?
That's right. If you remember the roadmap at the beginning of this year, we were in a very strict lockdown, of course, in January, and Boris Johnson announced there will be a series of steps of reopening. Step 1 being children back to school. Step 2, as you say, in mid-April being you could sit in a hospitality venue, but only outside, and there was still no indoor mixing. Now, why do we need to think back to those steps? Because the scientists advising the government on the SAGE committee published their minutes on Saturday. Pretty gloomy reading, saying that if the government wants to stem hospital admissions that they think are coming down the track, we may need to return to step 2 or even step 1 in the coming days if they want to make a dent in those. Now, I understand that the possibility of step 2, no indoor mixing with anyone apart from your household, only sitting outside, was something that was discussed yesterday at Boris Johnson's cabinet meeting. Now, it wasn't that the Prime Minister said, let's do this, and the rest of the cabinet said no. They had a frank discussion about it, but it seems that a lot of cabinet ministers, and particularly the Chancellor, didn't want to take any more measures at the moment until they've got more data, despite the scientists telling them you need to act sooner rather than later. So it was discussed yesterday, nothing so far, but as you heard, the Prime Minister wants to keep it all in reserve, so it all feels a little bit when, not if, but that's the sort of measures that are now being discussed going forward.
OK, now that was in April of last year when those measures came in. This is what happened with Matt Hancock in a news conference in Downing Street the following month.
People can now spend time outdoors and exercise as often as you like, and you can meet one other person from outside your household in an outdoor public place, but please keep 2 meters apart. This weekend, with the good weather and the new rules, I hope people can enjoy being outside. But please, stick with the rules, keep an eye on your family, and don't take risks.
So step 2 was still in place. And just about a few minutes after that news conference, this is what was happening in the garden of Downing Street. And the guy there with his back to you with the suit, that, according to some, is Matt Hancock, doing exactly what he told people not to do. Or is he? I don't know. Let's find out what Tamara thinks. Your take on that, Tamara?
Well, Kay, yes, Matt Hancock has admitted being in Downing Street on that day, the day we believe of a press conference. He said that he debriefed with the Prime Minister and then he left to go back to the Department of Health. We have not independently verified that that is Matt Hancock, but that is what's being reported. And of course, this is the same month that he was pictured with his aide at the Department of Health, which led to his resignation. So already accusations that Matt Hancock was not accusations, he's admitted not following the rules at that stage of the pandemic, and now an accusation that he was actually at this Downing Street gathering when everybody else, as we've heard, some really tragic situations of people's elderly relatives dying alone, people going to huge lengths to try and follow those rules. So this again, another example, many think, of the government telling people to do one thing and they themselves doing another. Now, unlike the Downing Street Christmas gathering, which is still being investigated. On this gathering, the government have been pretty defensive, and Boris Johnson, who was answering questions yesterday, claimed it was work gathering, talking about work, although it was pointed out to him that there don't seem to be many laptops in sight, and there are bottles of wine and cheese in sight, but the government very much standing firm on that being a work meeting, in suits, as Dominic Raab told you yesterday, so that is what they are saying. We'll make our own minds up, I'm sure.
OK. Just before I let you go, when do you think, with no minister today, I'm not sure why, but there we go, hopefully they'll be back with us tomorrow. When might we hear more about when the restrictions could be, just to underline that point tomorrow?
So Boris Johnson didn't rule out restrictions before Christmas. Yes, some people think it's unlikely because they haven't brought them in yet, but he didn't rule it out. Number 10 have stressed that to me again today, that he didn't rule it out. I expect, Kay, that we'll get more data this week and there will be another cabinet meeting this week. So far, I think MPs are gearing up for a recall of Parliament to vote on possible restrictions next week, but there's no guarantee that it won't be earlier.
OK. Thanks, Tamara. Let's bring in Katie. She's in Trafalgar Square for us. There were supposed to be about 6,500 people gathering there, weren't there, on New Year's Eve? What's happened?
There were, Kay, and of course this is the second year running now that New Year's Eve celebrations have been cancelled here in London. It was moved here to Trafalgar Square for a slightly smaller event, as you say, about 6,500 people. I think there's normally 10,000 or more on the South Bank because of continued fears over the pandemic. But the mayor now, Sadiq Khan, saying that because of the surge in Omicron cases here in London, the event simply cannot go ahead in any form at all. And essentially what he's doing really is firing a warning shot to the government, saying things are really bad here and we need more help. He has been calling repeatedly for additional support for businesses here in London, particularly the hospitality centre, but the hospitality sector, bars, pubs, restaurants, which of course rely so heavily on being really busy at this time of year around Christmas and New Year. And the uncertainty over new restrictions coming in has absolutely decimated their bookings. And Mr Khan saying without additional support right now, jobs will be lost. And of course, this all comes after the mayor declared a major incident here in London over the weekend, essentially because he was frightened of how much COVID-related absences were going to impact the emergency services. We have, however, heard from the Met Police and London's Fire Brigade, who say at the moment they are managing to run a normal service despite higher than average levels of absences. London Ambulance Service, however, though, saying that they are extremely busy, but they will do everything they can to get to people who need them over this winter period.
OK, thank you. Also making the news for us this morning, Donald Trump has been booed after admitting getting a COVID booster. The former US president revealed he'd got the jab during an event in Texas with former TV presenter Bill O'Reilly.
Both the president and I are vaxxed, and did you get the booster?
Yes.
I got it too. Okay, so...
Don't. No. That's all. There's a very tiny group over there.
Up to 1,000 passengers on the Queen Mary II could be facing Christmas in isolation after a COVID outbreak on their cruise from Southampton to New York. The Daily Express reports that around 60 passengers have tested positive and are being kept in their cabins in an isolation corridor. The jury in the sex trafficking trial of Ghislaine Maxwell have begun their deliberations. During closing arguments in New York, prosecutors described her as a grown woman who preyed on vulnerable kids. But lawyers for the former girlfriend of the convicted paedophile, Jeffrey Epstein, deny she groomed young girls for him to abuse. The death toll from the super typhoon, which hit the Philippines last week, has now reached 375. Rescuers have warned the number of dead may increase further as many towns and villages remain cut off. It's estimated more than 400,000 people have been left homeless. The government's announced work will begin this week to electrify the Midland mainline rail network. The scheme came under fire last month after the eastern leg of HS2 between the East Midlands and Leeds was scrapped. Ministers insist their integrated rail plan will transform rail services in the Midlands and the North. And look away now if you don't like creepy crawlies. Giant millipedes, as long as a car and weighing 50 kilos, were once hunted across northern England, according to experts at the University of Cambridge. They say the creature, known as the Arthropleura, was most likely to have been seen 100 million years before the age of the dinosaur. And police in Ohio have presented a 27-year-old with a bravery award after he tackled a man suspected of stealing a pensioner's handbag. There you go. That's what he did. Oh, goodness, that went through quickly, didn't it? We'll recut that for you. Surveillance footage shows Deshaun Presley chasing Derek Vaughan outside a grocery store in Lemon Township earlier this month. There was a violent struggle between the two men. Sorry about that. We'll show you that in a bit more detail coming up later on. He basically stole the 87-year-old's purse. There we go. Should we slow it down a bit for you? There you go. He was having none of it. Grabbed hold of him. Let's take a look at the front pages for you, should we? The Guardian says that even though COVID is surging, the cabinet split means there'll be no extra curbs or restrictions, at least for now. The Financial Times reports that the Prime Minister faces cabinet deadlock over whether to bring in any tighter COVID restrictions in time for Christmas. The Eye reports that ministers demanded more data on the impact of the Omicron variant during yesterday's emergency cabinet meeting. They understand statistics about its severity will be available before Christmas and should then be able to be used to help the PM decide on restrictions. Daily Mail says the same. Their headline, "Rejoice, Christmas is looking safe." And the Mirror leads with news that the Queen will spend Christmas at Windsor instead of Sandringham, breaking her festive tradition for the second year running. So she's decided to stay at Windsor rather than heading to Sandringham, which is what she would normally do. But will she have family with her? Angela Levin is joining us, our royal biographer, of course. Hello, Angela. Thanks for joining us. Good morning. She's going to be devastated, isn't she?
I think she is, of course. She's been looking for this for a long time now because she's been so isolated and been on her own, and she's used to being with lots of people, and she loves her family, and I think she loves the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren even more than her own now because they're up and going their own way, and she just adores the little ones. And it also proves to her that the monarchy is just going on, which is what she really cares about. It is a shame because, as you said, she didn't go to Sandringham last year, and actually since 1988, Sandringham has been the place where all the royals gathered for Christmas. And Her Majesty likes routine, she likes loyalty, she likes things to be as they always has. She changes things, imperceptibly, but basically she likes the routine that she's had for 70 years. So I don't think she will be on her own. I'm quite sure that the royals who are close to her will make arrangements, as they did soon after Prince Philip's death, whereby they had times for each of them to go and see her and keep her company. And I think that will work very well. And of course, it doesn't mean she won't be able to go up to Sandringham at all. She does like to be there in January. She usually comes back on the 6th of February. So she can enjoy the walking and the views later. But 50 people were due there, and I think that is really too much. And most important of all, she wants to keep herself going for the Platinum Jubilee next spring. And she's going to have a wonderful time because it's a day with the horses, which she loves. There's going to be prayers in chapel. There's going to be all sorts of things. People all around the country are going to have get together and eat and be joyous, and a concert, everything you can think of that she would like. And it'd be wonderful because she is the first monarch to have ever been on the throne for over 70 years. And I think that although she's not a grandiose person in any way, other than being queen, she would love to have that in the history books.
I'm sure. Who do you think will be with her on Christmas Day?
Well, I think probably the locals will be, Prince Andrew will be there, and the Count and Countess of Essex with Louise. I mean, Louise, now sort of just 18, she gets on extremely well with the Queen, and she's very gentle and kind. And I think they might take it in turns. Prince Charles and Camilla will certainly be there, maybe not on Christmas Day or Boxing Day, but I think the Cambridges, William and Catherine, will go after that because they've got small children, and I think it's quite difficult. And they can also go to see Catherine's family, which William will love because he's so close to them. I mean, that's just my guess, but I think the people who are close to her will be there for her. And also she's got some of her own staff who she's very, very close to, including Angela Kelly, who's been her dressmaker and advisor and companion for many years now. And she will always give up anything to be with Her Majesty because she admires her, and they get on so well. So I think
it's such an interesting fit, that, isn't it? She's actually a Scouser, isn't she? But I remember her telling a fantastic story over the dinner table once about how she'd had to sell her washing machine to buy an appropriate frock to have her interview with the Queen, and she told the Queen the story, and she got the job.
Yes. Well, the Queen's got a great sense of humour, and I think she would think that was, a really sort of wacky answer as to why she wanted the job. And I don't think people would sell their washing machine for a dress unless they were really keen. And her judgment's been right. She's been wonderful to her, and the Queen has looked so smart and colourful and quietly modern in what she's worn lately, with Angela's advice, or not with the scarf over her head, but when she's on duty, she
I think she's
terrific.
been beavering away actually of late. I think she received, was it the Sultan of Oman, quite recently. You talked about who may or may not be available to spend Christmas with her. I'm surprised that perhaps Charles wouldn't go.
Yeah, I said that. I'm sure that they would go because I think they might be at Highgrove. They won't go up to Scotland yet, which they always do, but they might be in Highgrove, and that would be very easy. And Charles is very devoted to his mother, always has been, wants to please her. And Camilla now gets on with her incredibly well. She's accepted totally. They have lots in common, like horses and dogs, which they can talk about for ages. And also, my goodness, isn't she working hard? She's taking on more and more patronage than almost anybody else. I mean, almost every day there's another one, and she does it thoroughly. She doesn't just want her name on a note paper.
Yeah. Do you think, Angela, sorry to interrupt, do you think that she is doing what she's done, cancel the Christmas, in order to offer support to her government, or because she is anxious about Omicron herself?
I think it's very much to show the country as an example of making a decision that is very difficult, but perhaps is the right one. And she wants to seem, and I think she's done that for the last few years, to be the same as us. You know, when the pandemic arrived in 2020, we desperately wanted her to speak to us, and 23 million people listened to her to say, we will get by, we will get on. And it was as if she was just one of us and looking after us as a sort of grandmother should, really. And I think that she wants to set a good example.
OK, it's always great to talk to you, Angela. You've always got such great insight. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. The volcano on La Palma has appeared to have stopped. Police officers on La Palma have taken to feeding cats in the area who have been left homeless by the destruction from the volcano. There you go. The volcano went quiet last week, and scientists say this may signal the end, but will not declare the eruption officially over unless the lack of seismic activity continues through until Christmas Eve. And then there's an awful lot of clearing up to do, isn't there? Meanwhile, demand has erupted for wine that shares its name with the La Palma volcano. Sales of Cumbre Vieja red wine have soared since the eruption began 3 months ago, providing an unexpected windfall for its vineyard. There you go. Forecasters say there is a chance of snow in Britain on Christmas Day. Will we see some snow down south again? The official forecast says the parts of the country most likely to see snowfall are Scotland, the far north of England and Northern Ireland. But they are warning the outlook remains uncertain. Here it is in more detail.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
More unsettled midweek, bringing an increasing risk of ice and snow as we head towards the Christmas period. Relatively quiet picture just now, with most places starting the day on a cloudy note.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
So no minister for you today, so we're not sure what the latest figures are as far as Omicron and the number of people in hospital is concerned. We'll try and get that for you. But we can tell you that the list of events cancelled across the UK due to the Omicron variant continues to grow. Last night, London's New Year's Eve celebrations in Trafalgar Square, just hearing about that, weren't we? They've been called off. And around Europe, restrictions are being tightened. The Netherlands has the toughest rules. The whole country is now back in full lockdown until at least the 14th of January. My goodness. Germany says anyone arriving from the UK must go into quarantine for 2 weeks, regardless of their vaccination status. In Denmark, all cinemas, theatres and museums have been closed. France has enforced its health pass, meaning people have to be fully vaccinated to get into restaurants, museums and sporting events. Official New Year's Eve fireworks and public parties are also cancelled. And in Ireland, all restaurants and bars, apart from takeaways and delivery services, now close at 8 p.m. From Dublin, our Ireland correspondent Stephen Murphy reports.
7 p.m, 8 p.m. This is how Irish nights out are now, over at 8, until at least the end of January.
For me, it doesn't bother me. I'm happy enough to have a few pints and leave at 8 o'clock. But for younger people, it's much more difficult, I think.
Do you think people will just drink in houses now?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I don't see people are going to be in a situation where they have there's no kind of barriers or restrictions or anything holding people back. People are going to be absolutely hammered in gaffs and just spreading it even further.
Is that what you're doing now?
I will be doing it though. That's the worst part.
Thanks, folks. Sorry about this.
Publicans say they've been left bewildered by the new restrictions.
No, literally a couple of minutes after 8 o'clock, Christmas week, and it's completely deserted.
Yeah, it's just surreal. I've done some strange things in my time, but that's right up there. I mean, it just feels kind of ridiculous. It feels pointless. It feels wrong. And it's actually very upsetting just knowing your business is just getting destroyed slowly but surely.
The new rules have been put in place because of the rise of Omicron, which in the space of just 2 weeks has overtaken Delta to become Ireland's dominant strain. The government has warned of record case numbers in the coming days as it urges people to get their booster shots. But once again, the hospitality industry feels it's being made an easy scapegoat.
We feel pretty devastated, to be honest.
In the Dublin suburbs, publican Deirdre Devitt has spent tens of thousands of euro on outdoor seating, a coffee van and filtration systems. But now she's going to be hit hard in the pocket again.
The bar here opens at 12. Is opening from 12 to 8 p.m. viable for you?
We have absolutely no idea, Stephen, if it's viable, because we don't know what's coming. We're one of the most social countries in the world. Every celebration is had in pubs and restaurants and hotels. And you know, there's pubs, friends of mine have pubs and restaurants that are empty, and it's Christmas week. We cannot continue like this.
Shutting up by 8 p.m. may kill the Christmas spirit for punters, but it's the businesses that are really suffering. Despite renewed financial supports from government, Irish pubs and restaurants simply can't afford to keep opening and closing. Nearly 2 years on, they say, there's still no plan for truly living with COVID. Stephen Murphy, Sky News in Dublin.
Latest COVID figures for the UK for you. A further 91,000 new COVID cases, 44 new deaths sadly have been recorded, brings the total number of deaths to 147,261. As for vaccines, 33,000 first doses have been delivered, an additional almost 40,000 second doses. Total number of second doses now more than 47.5 million. Look at these booster doses, 846,466 boosters have been delivered in the last 24 hours, which brings the total amount of boosters delivered pushing 29 million, more than half of the adult population. In terms of Omicron, there have been an additional 8,000 cases of the Omicron variant reported across the UK. Total number of confirmed Omicron cases in the UK now add up to 45,145. Those thousands of COVID patients are being treated by hospital staff across the country. Their treatment will have to continue throughout the holidays. Joining us now, COVID ICU anaesthetist, Dr. Ed Patrick. Hello to you, Ed. Thanks for joining us. What's it been like in ICU over the last few days?
Hi, Kay. Love to join you again. It's been pretty much the same it has been for the last few months. So we still have COVID patients coming into hospital, into ICU. I think one of the things that's happening is that people are just wondering what's going to happen over the next couple of weeks and how it's going to affect admissions, but also I think staffing as well, because obviously if other people are getting it and needing to go off sick, that might be a big issue for the NHS.
How worried are you about the Omicron cases? Have you had any?
So it's difficult to say what we've had because that sort of information doesn't really filter down to us. So we get whether someone's actually COVID positive, but we never get to the point of actually hearing whether it's Omicron or not. So those statistics aren't feeding down. But
would that be quite useful when you're treating them?
It might be useful just to know what it's like on the ground, but the treatment is still going to be the same. So I think that's what people would say about it. But I think it would be helpful just to know, region by region where that is.
What do you say to people who are still reluctant to get their jabs? I'm always surprised when we read out the number of people that are going for their first vaccination. Another 30,000 people yesterday decided, oh, all right, then I'll have one.
So what I'd say to people who are still hesitant is that if you end up with COVID and end up coming into hospital, is that you need a cocktail of drugs in order to keep you alive when you're in intensive care, all of which have side effects. So that can be avoided if the vaccine can stop you from getting severely ill. And the other thing to say is, people talk about side effects with vaccine things, or they're worried about things like clots. Well, COVID can give you clots, and people who come into hospital who are suffering from COVID will go on to medication to help stop their blood clotting to that extent. So all this can be avoided by having a vaccine. So if you are on the fence about it or still wondering, I'd definitely recommend getting one.
And do you find there is unvaccinated remorse when people come in and they say, I wish I'd had the vaccination when I could?
I think people definitely think about whether they could turn back time, because obviously you can't give the vaccine once you're in hospital. It's a preventative thing. So once that horse has bolted, there's no going back to give the vaccine. I think there's definitely feelings of remorse and obviously frustration from all sides around that this could possibly have been prevented.
Yeah. Do you see many people in ICU that have been vaccinated?
It's mostly unvaccinated people I see in ICU. People who are vaccinated are there with other problems that possibly affect their immune system, meaning that they don't respond as well to the vaccine. But the vast majority at the moment are unvaccinated. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen in the next few weeks when there's a possible worry about surge of infections and whether that changes or not. So we'll have to see just then.
Final thought, when are you expecting to see that surge?
There's possible talk of surging in patients coming in January at some point, and I think we're talking about planning of how we can sort of deal with staff and if there's any staff shortages. So I think that's the time when we're expecting, because obviously there's a lag between when you get infected, when you become unwell, and then when you become so unwell that you actually need hospital treatment. And so we're thinking the thinking is that that's going to be in January.
Okay, good to talk to you, Doctor. Keep well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any hope of foreign travel this winter? We all sigh, don't we? Joining us, Claire Irvin, travel editor at The Telegraph. Hi, Claire. We spoke to you, or you certainly used one of your tweets last week when we found out what France were doing. Now we're hearing that potentially step 2 could be brought in. Don't know if it will. It could be, which means that if you try and travel overseas, you get fined £5,000.
Yeah. That's the cost I think many people haven't factored into their holiday. I mean, firstly, of course, there is confusion between whether it's tier 2 or step 2. Of course, nothing's been confirmed. Let me say step 2 is a much more serious implication for not just for international travel, but for any of us hoping to, spend time with family and friends, either overseas or even domestically. So it's, if that is brought in, it will be another blow. And interestingly, it also contradicts what the Health Secretary said about travel restrictions when a couple of weeks ago they scrapped the red list. Because then the thinking was, well, Omicron's so widely spread that in actual fact, travel restrictions are pretty pointless. So, of course, what that thinking does is open up travel to those people who have the ability to be a bit flexible, who can afford any extra testing and so on around that, and really want to be able to travel and to travel safely. Of course, it has so great implications for those people, for people, as I say, hoping to meet up. But, the industry that supports our holiday, that helps us actually get there, the hotels, the ground staff, the airlines. So, a step 2 would be a very bleak introduction for the travel industry and any of us hoping to use it.
What about just the threat of step 2? What does that? What advice would you give people this morning?
I mean, yesterday I was talking to hoteliers. I went into a couple of hotel lobbies, and the impact already of the last 10 days is immense. I mean, we're talking hundreds of thousands of pounds impact on individual hotels and restaurants. I was talking to one GM yesterday who said that they have a really high repeat level of repeat guests, and in the last week they'd had guests phoning up in the morning to cancel, and then phoning up again in the afternoon to rebook for that same evening, because indecision is so just completely, it erodes confidence, and that's the biggest problem facing the travel industry, apart from just actual closure, but this kind of stealth closure, whereby people don't feel comfortable going for dinner or don't feel comfortable honouring a hotel booking, is decimating those industries, and indeed then, as I say, the experience that we all have then when we finally can travel, because there isn't the staff, there isn't the infrastructure, and it risks standards slipping. So all in all, it's bad news.
What advice would you give to families who are potentially, they have Christmas at home and then they're either going for a sunshine holiday or they're going skiing on Boxing Day? Should they still go?
Well, my advice would be the same as it's been throughout the pandemic, is be flexible, be open-minded. We have lots of advice on ski swaps. So, for example, if you've got a ski holiday booked and you were hoping to go to France, there are other options. There are ski resorts in other countries that you can travel to that have availability. There are ways that you can travel there quite cost effectively. But as we've been saying all the way through the pandemic, book with a bonded tour operator, ATOL bonded tour operator, because then you know you'll get your money back. Then you'll know you'll be supported if you need to isolate or find alternative accommodation when you're there.
Sorry to interrupt, Claire, but what happens if step 2 comes in the day after you travel?
I think if we go by tier 2, well, you're already there, so you get to finish your holiday and come back.
Yeah.
Effectively.
It's tricky, isn't it? Yeah. It's tricky though, isn't it, to know what to do?
Yeah, well, if you're in that situation, I would just enjoy your holiday while you can.
It's a very good tip. Merry Christmas. I hope you have a good one. Thank you very much, Claire Irvin from The Telegraph. Thank you. Now, a new exhibition aims to highlight the impact of climate change by showing its effects in some of the most remote and beautiful places on Earth. This is one of the photos, a picture of a little penguin taken in Antarctica. And here we have this mix of landscape in Greenland. Beautiful. Joining us now is Amy Vitale, founder of the Vital Impacts and National Geographic photographer and filmmaker, and Marcy James, paper and ink studio owners. Hello to you both. Thank you so much for joining us on the programme this morning. So tell us more about your work, ladies.
Well, hello. Yes, we basically decided to, I work with National Geographic and have this rare opportunity to be connected to so many extraordinary photographers, artists, and basically decided to create a print sale where we can sell this art and raise much needed funding for incredible conservation happening all over the planet. And I'm really excited because one of the stars of this is Jane Goodall herself. And, we asked her if she made any photographs, and in fact, she has. And so we have these really beautiful, even a self-portrait,
There's
which
a signed print of Jane's.
So basically, we've got 100 of the world's finest artists and photographers, names you may know of, like Nick Brandt, Jim Naughton, Paul Nicklin, Beth Moon, so many incredible artists, and then people that you may not know of as well. We really searched to find just beautiful new voices that are out there. And they're shared.
As we look at these pictures in more detail, ladies, perhaps you'd like to talk us through them. I don't know if you can see them. Great picture of a dolphin there. And where people can see more of them.
Yes, so the website is vitalimpacts.org. And the photographers are all incredibly diverse, but their one shared commitment is to the environment. And so all of these images, it's a range of work from wildlife photographers, but also artists, and they all really speak about the planet, where we're going. And I think the idea is to connect your heart and mind, because there's this really strong connection between images and empathy. And I believe that, that will help us, feel love and compassion for all the animals and this planet that we share with. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we also have a partner in London, the print space. So they're helping fulfill those orders, and you're carbon neutral here. And
yeah, so we just brought in this year to incorporate the print space. So they print out of London and as well as Germany. And they ship to all of the locations internationally. I cover all of the shipping for the United States. And the main reason why we wanted to do this was for sustainability, so that printers aren't traveling such a long distance.
Amazing photos, ladies. It's absolutely fantastic to talk to you. Thank you so much for sharing them with us this morning. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye. Thank you.